This film begins with a flashback that tells the situation in 1442 AD. Back then, the Sultan of Turkey enslaved 1,000 boys from Transylvania to fight in his army. One of the 1,000 boys was the Prince of Transylvania. He was Prince Vlad, played by Luke Evans. After the war was over, Vlad returned to Transylvania to rule there. The scene changed and showed Vlad and some of his royal soldiers investigating something that was found by the villagers. It was a helmet of the Turkish army that was damaged in the river. From the damage, it looked like it was scratched by claws. Vlad then searched for the source of the river, which turned out to come from a mountain called Broken Tooth Mountain. He invited 2 of his men to investigate the mountain. There was a cave in the mountain. When they arrived at the entrance of the cave, they were startled by bats that suddenly came out of the cave. Then Vlad and the 2 men bravely entered the cave. It turned out that there were a lot of human bone fragments and skulls there. Suddenly, they heard something growling at them. Vlad told his friends to get out of there. But unfortunately, his 2 guards were attacked and seemed to be dead. But luckily, Vlad managed to run to the entrance of the cave. It turned out that the creature in the cave was afraid of sunlight. Vlad left the place alone. When he arrived at the palace, he met a priest there and asked him what kind of creature was in the cave. As expected, it was a vampire. Vlad told the priest to keep the existence of the creature a secret because he was afraid that his people would be more worried. After meeting the priest, Vlad went to see his wife and son. It turned out that Vlad had not been home for a long time. He was greeted with a warm hug and kiss from his beloved wife, named Marina, and his son, named Ingaras. While in the bedroom, Vlad and Marina talked about the situation in their kingdom. But then Vlad pulled Marina to take a bath together. The next day, the Kingdom of Transylvania celebrated Easter and the return of their prince. But the joy was suddenly ended by the arrival of the Turkish army at the palace. Vlad gave them the usual tribute of silver coins, but the emissary wanted an additional tribute of 1,000 boys to be trained as janissaries. Suddenly, the situation became chaotic, because the Turkish troops would destroy the Transylvanian kingdom if they did not obey their orders. At night, Vlad accompanies Ingaras to bed, and Ingaras asks if he will be given to Turkey. Vlad seemed hesitant to answer, and then left Ingaras. Vlad returns to his room and talks to Marina. Marina believed that Vlad could persuade Sultan Mehmed II to show mercy, and Vlad agreed to Marina's suggestion. And the next day, he went straight to the place where the Sultan was. Apparently, when he was a Turk, Vlad was quite close to this Sultan. He met Sultan Mehmed, and they chatted while having coffee together. Mehmed asked Vlad where the 1,000 boys he asked for were. Vlad said that he couldn't do that, and that he himself would take the place of the 1,000 boys. But Mehmed insisted on his desire, because it was a final decision. Vlad brought his son to be handed over to the Turkish army as a prisoner of the kingdom. When he was about to hand him over, Mirena did not let him go. She fought with Vlad, but in the end Ingaras was the one who wanted to go. Ingaras wanted his father to be proud of him. But suddenly Vlad changed his mind and took him back. Vlad then took his sword and fought all the Turkish soldiers alone. Vlad told Mirena, Ingaras, and his people to go back to his castle, while he would look for another way to fight the Turkish army. Vlad went back up to the Broken Tooth Mountain and entered the cave inhabited by the vampire. When he arrived in the cave, Vlad was greeted by the vampire. The vampire himself wondered why Vlad came back there. Apparently, Vlad wanted the power of the vampire so that he could fight the Turkish army and save his people. The vampire was interested in Vlad's offer because he might become like him, and he would also be free from the cave. The vampire told Vlad to drink his blood, and if Vlad could not drink human blood for 3 days, he would become a normal human again. But if not, he would also become a vampire. Vlad accepted all the consequences because he had no other choice. He drank the blood of the vampire, and suddenly he passed out. When he woke up, he was no longer in the cave, but in the downstream of the river. Vlad then felt the new power he got. He could even turn into a bat. Vlad flew back to his castle. When he got there, the Turkish army had started attacking. Vlad assured his people not to worry because he would protect them all. Vlad went alone to the battlefield to fight the entire Turkish army. Because he was as strong as a vampire, Vlad easily won by himself against thousands of Turkish soldiers. When the battle was over, the army from his castle came. They were late. Vlad told his army not to talk about what happened that night. Vlad then told half of his people to move to a monastery. He chose that place because it was on a high ground, so it could not be reached by the Turkish cannons. On the other hand, in the Turkish camp, Mehmed got the news that 1,000 of his soldiers had been defeated by Vlad. Instead of being afraid, Mehmed ordered to send 100,000 soldiers there, and he himself would lead the army. On the way to the monastery, Vlad looked very hungry, especially when he saw his soldiers eating. Vlad was hungry, but he could not eat. Vlad went and entered his tent with Marina. Vlad approached Marina and sat next to her. Marina started to be naughty and teased Vlad. Vlad was tempted and continued what was started by Marina. But the hot scene had to stop because Vlad accidentally wanted to drink Marina's blood. He left Marina, who looked confused. Halfway to the forest, Vlad was approached by a man. He was the one who reported the discovery of the Turkish helmet at the beginning of the film, and he knew that Vlad was no longer a human. He worshipped Vlad and wanted to be his servant. He immediately injured his own hand and bled a lot. He put the blood in a glass and gave it to Vlad. But because his faith was still strong, Vlad threw the glass and attacked the man. He warned the man to stay away from him, and the man obeyed Vlad's order and left. Vlad was alone and lamented the blood that was given to him. He had to resist with all his strength. The next day, Mehmed checked the remains of his army's battle with Vlad. There was still one person alive. He had a message. Apparently, Vlad wanted to show an amazing victory to Mehmed. The victory was that all of Mehmed's soldiers were killed and impaled on wooden stakes. Mehmed could only be silent seeing the sight. On the other hand, Marina woke up and saw Vlad sleeping and shivering under his tent. Marina realized that the wounds on Vlad's body suddenly disappeared and saw that the silver necklace that Vlad wore seemed to hurt him. Vlad woke up and surprised Marina. Vlad finally told Marina the truth about his power. Vlad showed that he would burn if exposed to sunlight, and he was not strong against pure silver. Marina could not blame Vlad because Vlad sacrificed himself for his son and his people. After that, the troops asked Vlad to move immediately, but Marina said that Vlad left. She is lying because, of course, Vlad can't go out at sunrise, so he stayed in the tent. Finally, the weather was warm and all his people left to continue their journey. But unknown to them, the Turks had already known their tactics and where they were going. The day turned into night, and finally Vlad could go out. At the same time, the Turkish army began to attack and slaughter Vlad's people. Then he finally got there and managed to save most of his people. But unfortunately, one of his trusted friends, Dumitru, was killed. In short, they finally arrived at the monastery. But it turned out that there was one Turkish soldier who was still alive but unknown to Vlad. When he arrived at the monastery, Vlad began to scold the people who prayed and said that praying would not produce anything. Vlad told his army to prepare weapons for war. When Ingarus walked around and saw something in a tightly closed room, Vlad said that there was something inside that he did not want to use again. On the other hand, because there was one survivor, he sent very valuable information to Mehmed that Vlad had black magic and could turn into a vampire. Mehmed immediately left with his army to attack the monastery. In the morning, at the monastery, the priest who knew about the secret of the vampire saw Vlad's strange behavior. He always hid in the shadows and did not want to be exposed to sunlight. The priest knew what had happened to Vlad and confronted him. He politely asked him to kill Vlad before his people killed him. He also said that Vlad could still repent. But because he did not get a response from Vlad, the priest immediately slashed the cloth that blocked the sunlight. The sunlight immediately hit Vlad, making him burn. His people who knew it immediately gathered to burn the place where Marina was. Marina could not stop her people, but suddenly a roar was heard from Vlad. Apparently, Vlad was still alive. He cursed his people and said that they could live until now because of him. He was the one who protected them all. How ironic. Marina came to Vlad and calmed him down. Finally, Vlad could calm himself down. The scene changed and Vlad was seen praying for forgiveness for what he had done. Ingarus came to his father and felt guilty. Ingarus thought that his father became like that to save him from the Turkish army. Vlad answered that he did not mind to protect Ingaras again and again. That night, it was the last night for Vlad to be a vampire. Vlad and Marina talked about Vlad's sacrifice for his son and his people. Marina said that their love story would always exist even in the afterlife. They finally hugged each other as long as they could before the war started. When the war was about to begin, Vlad's people still feared him. Because the number of Turkish soldiers was very large, Vlad thought of a plan to kill them all. Vlad went to the highest tower in the monastery and gathered thousands of bats that he controlled. Vlad then unleashed the bats to attack the Turkish army. Although they were still outnumbered, the Turkish army seemed to have a hard time dealing with Vlad's attack. Vlad saw Mehmed, and he immediately left Marina and Ingaras to attack him. But when he attacked, it turned out that it was not Mehmed, but someone else. Apparently, Vlad had been trapped. Secretly, there were Turkish soldiers who sneaked into the place where Marina and Ingaras were. Ingaras was taken away, while Marina was pushed from the tower. Vlad immediately flew to the top of the tower and tried to catch Marina, but it was too late. Marina fell and was almost dead. Mehmed's army rejoiced because they had succeeded in getting Ingaras and slaughtering all of Vlad's people. In her last breath, Marina told Vlad to drink her blood. At first, Vlad refused, but Marina reminded him that he could still save their son. Finally, Vlad bit her neck and Marina died. Vlad became a vampire forever. Vlad looked regretful, but what could he do? On the other hand, the vampire who was locked in the cave was freed because Vlad became a full vampire. Vlad returned to the monastery and offered revenge for the remaining people who were still alive there. He turned all his people into vampires and reluctantly opened the room that he locked tightly. There was Vlad's war suit that he used during the war. Vlad also buried Marina's body properly to remember his beloved wife. On the other hand, the Turkish army looked from the east. The sun should have risen, but it did not. It seemed to be covered by a storm cloud. It turned out that it was Vlad who covered the sun so that he could attack the Turkish army easily. Mehmed's army ran away because they were attacked by many vampires. Vlad himself went straight to Mehmed to get Ingaras. When he arrived at Mehmed's tent, there were many silver coins scattered around Mehmed. Of course, Vlad was weak against silver. But for Ingaras, he dared to enter the silver minefield to fight Mehmed. Of course, with the condition of being surrounded by silver and being weak, Mehmed could easily defeat him. He was about to stab a wooden stake into Vlad's heart. Vlad turned into a bat and turned to attack Mehmed. Before drinking Mehmed's blood, Vlad said that his name was no longer Vlad, but Dracula, the son of the devil. Vlad immediately drank Mehmed's blood in front of Ingaras. Ingaras himself was not surprised to see his father because he already knew. When he was about to leave, it turned out that all the Turkish soldiers had been drained of their blood by the other vampire army. Because Ingaras was the only human there, it was natural that all the vampires there wanted to drink his blood. Fortunately, a priest came who wanted to save Ingaras. Vlad handed Ingaras to the priest, and Vlad finally felt relieved and could leave peacefully because Ingaras was safe. Vlad then removed the black cloud that covered the sun. The vampires there burned with Vlad, who had accepted his death. Some time passed. Ingaras was crowned as the king of Transylvania. Even though he was still young, he was the only descendant of the royal family left. But it turned out that when Vlad was burning in the sunlight, his servant who once offered him blood came. The servant gives his blood to the dying Vlad, and eventually Vlad comes back to life as a vampire. Hundreds of years passed, precisely in the present time. Vlad was seen adapting to his environment. He walked around and met Marina, more precisely, the reincarnation of Marina. Vlad was fascinated and kept looking at her. Vlad tried to talk to her, but she left him alone. Vlad then said the words that Marina often said to him, and finally the woman turned back and approached him. They looked closer and left together. In the distance, the vampire who was trapped in the cave of Broken Tooth Mountain was also there and watched Vlad. And the movie ends.
If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe. Because by subscribing, you have supported me to make better videos. See you in the next video.